Good afternoon, 7.2 and 7.3. This is the additional lesson that I discussed with you on Monday when I uploaded my video last week. Because obviously we are studying dystopia, and you know it's maybe a new genre to some of you. And I have recommended a book to you. I think it's on the last slide of my last PowerPoint, which is called A Place Called Perfect by Helena Duggan. And what I felt like I'd do once a week is to do just like a little lesson. It's not a lesson, retract that. It's just a session of me reading with you. Okay, so I'm going to put it under the visualizer, and once a week we can read together. You know that I constantly bang on about the importance of reading, and you know, lots of you are given a book to hand over to you. You won't necessarily pick it up and read it, and that's absolutely fine. You know, society's changed, and I'm probably an old dinosaur and whatever, but listen to the old dinosaur when I say reading is so important. It's for your mind, for your self-esteem, your brain. It just really encourages you to learn new words. Maybe even makes you calm and relaxed. And actually, on this wet and windy and thundery afternoon, I felt like I would come and read a couple of chapters of this book together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it under the visualizer, and then I'll come back once a week and we can read it together. So there's no work, there's no writing, there's no question, you know, let's talk about the narrative voice or anything like that. It's just, let's just read together. Okay, so perhaps grab your hot drink, which, you know, mine is obviously black coffee, as you well know, and we can read together. If you didn't manage to find the PDF, I'm going to put it on the visualizer, like I said, but I did send you a PDF. The reason why I've got all three books here is it's a trilogy. I think there might be a fourth one coming out, I'm not totally sure. And my daughter, like I said in the last lesson, she's year 7, and she thoroughly recommends these books. And they are of the dystopian nature. It is about a town. It's about a girl who moves to this new town. She's the new girl in the town. Her family and herself move there, and she starts noticing things aren't quite right. And by the end of the third book, it is well and truly a dystopian novel in the sense that people are being watched, people are being drugged, not badly by the way, but they are fed a certain tea which alters their mind. They're being controlled by these evil brothers. There's these, you can have a look here, there's some eye plants. They've got cameras in the plants. It's brilliant. It's really, really is good. The very first book is it's a great book from the outset, but it's slow to embed dystopian features. So we're looking at what makes a dystopian novel dystopian in terms of the conventions of it. But it is a really lovely book for us to read too. So I'm going to flick over. Getting better at this technology, guys. Right. I'm going to flip over. So here we go. Here's the front cover. And A Place Called Perfect. And actually the tagline here says they've got their eyes on you, which is very sinister, isn't it? And by Helena Duggan. Open it up. We've got a lovely little map, and had we been in class, I know that lots of you would be taking a long time to be looking at that as opposed to following along, so get that out of the way. You have to excuse my nails because I'm running out of time. Right, I'm going to see if we can make this a little bit more. Can we read it from there? Right, let's read, just as we would in class. Okay, so the first one, the chapter is called Boy. He waited, hidden by dusk in the garden bushes against the bark of an oak tree, watching. The spot gave him full view of the house and gravel driveway. Worrying about being seen felt weird. Perfect had been alive with the news of Dr. Eugene Brown's arrival for weeks. The doctor would help. Boy knew it, more than he'd ever known anything. He just had to get to the man before he changed. As night closed in, George and Edward Archer strode by and mounted the stone steps to the house. The place lit up, and Boy watched them move around inside. Suddenly, light darted across the grass by his feet, and the boy pulled back further into the shadows. A silver car crunched along the driveway towards him and stopped. His heartbeat quickened. The engine purred to silence. The large door of the house opened and the Archer twins stood silhouetted in the light from the hallway. As Boy watched, statue still, a shiver danced down his spine. A man got out of the driver's seat, a woman from the passenger side. He hadn't imagined the doctor would have company. The woman looked nervous, staring across the roof of the car at the man. He smiled awkwardly at her and then walked towards the twins, greeting them with a handshake. The woman followed, and the four of them disappeared inside. Boy ventured a little out of the shadows, stopping short as the doctor called, "Violet, come in from the car, pet. It's chilly out there." The back door of the car opened a little, then quickly slammed shut as a breeze rustled the leaves above him. Boy held his breath and pulled back into hiding. The car door swung open again, and this time a small, frightened girl dashed out across the gravel towards the house. Boy couldn't help laughing. She sped up, jumped the steps, and rushed in for the front door, banging it shut behind her and plunging the yard back into darkness. The car door hung open, and Boy pushed it shut as he edged close to the kitchen window. He just caught sight of the girl sliding into the room. He sat down by the steps to wait. Night rolled on. The watchers would be patrolling soon, and he couldn't be caught outside the walls again. He'd come back in the morning, early, and speak to the doctor then. He took one last look in the window. The girl sat between her mum and dad, a proper family. Something inside him stung as he thumbed the rub-worn note in his pocket. Okay, so we've got the introduction to the new character called Boy, and then there's obviously the girl called Violet. And we're already hearing the words watchers. There are watchers, and they'll be patrolling soon, and he couldn't be caught outside the walls again. So obviously containment, people watching. Again, we're already getting into the dystopian idea, the theme. Okay, so Chapter 2, A Silent Protest. Violet woke up with a start as the car crunched to a stop over squashed gravel. It was dark. She pulled herself up from the warm leather seat and peered out of the side window. The house was big, much bigger than their old one, and looked like something from a magazine. The lights were on inside. She gasped and ducked back down. Two dark figures, one tall, one small, stood shadowed in the light from the open doorway. Violet's father looked at her mother, then unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the car. "Ah, Mr. and Mr. Archer," her father said, approaching the men. "We didn't expect a welcome committee." "Well, of course, Dr. Brown. We wanted to see you settled," the taller one said, extending his hand. "We've been preparing all day. The house is spick and span with the kettle on the boil," the smaller man said, stepping in front of the larger one to grab her father's hand. "Leave your stuff in the car and come in for a brew. I'm sure you must all be exhausted." "Of course, how kind," her mother said, reaching the front door to greet both men. "We'd love a cuppa." The four entered the house, leaving Violet to fume in her seat, seemingly forgotten. "Violet, come in from the car, pet. It's chilly out there," her father called from across the driveway. He hadn't forgotten her after all. That still didn't mean he cared about her, though. He only cared about his job. When he was offered it, her mother had said, "It's a job amongst jobs." It was probably like winning an Oscar for opticians. Her dad's exact words had been, "I'd be stupid, utterly stupid to turn it down." Her dad was an ophthalmologist, which meant he was an eye surgeon and cut up eyes all day. Violet thought it was disgusting, so whenever anyone asked, she said he was an optician. His work meant so much to him, and other people's parents always seemed to talk about how much they hated their jobs, but not her dad. Violet was proud of him, but that didn't mean she was happy to pack up all of her stuff and leave her friends just because of his new job. She thought he was selfish and had told him as much through her tears that night he'd announced they were moving. She pushed open the heavy car door and poked her head out to look left and then right. The driveway was dark and surrounded by large trees. Huge twisted branches played on the wind, sweeping shadows across the gravel. Violet shivered as the leaves began to whisper. She jumped back and slammed the door, locking herself safely inside the car. Look at that lovely personification there, guys. Her mum always said she had an overactive imagination. Violet wished she knew how to make it underactive, as she looked out on the dark yard and imagined all the monsters that might lurk in the surrounding trees. She'd have to make a run for it. She took a deep breath. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. She flung open the door, jumped out, and ran for the house. Without looking left or right, she bounded up the steps and leapt over the threshold. Just as she slammed the front door, she thought she heard laughter echo through the trees. She slid down the wall into the hall floor, trying to catch her breath. Surely it wasn't laughter. And then the car door banged and she froze. Was there someone outside? Heartbeat quickened. Violet, is that you, pet? Her mother called from a room down the hallway. Come in and say hello to our guests. Violet shook the dark thoughts from her mind, putting all sounds down to the wind. There goes your imagination again, as she scolded herself, getting up from the floor. She pulled off her shoes and threw them down by the door. The hall was covered in shiny cream tiles, perfect for socks. She took a run and slid the whole way into the room, straight ahead, coming to a stop against the kitchen table. 4 pairs of eyes stared at her, 2 in embarrassment, 2 in shock. Violet, her father snapped, we have guests. Violet didn't respond. She decided the night before that she wasn't going to talk to her dad for as long as it took him to change his mind and move them all home again. She hated not talking to him because she loved him more than £1 billion, but she didn't want the same thing as her dad. Her mum didn't really either. Rose Brown was an accountant to a successful firm and had lots of friends in their old town, but she told Violet that sometimes you had to do what was right, even though it was hard and you might not want to do it, and that was this move was right for their family. Violet had thought about not talking to her mum either, but as an only child, that would mean she'd have no one to talk to, at least until she made some friends. Quickly, her dad covered the silence, introducing to the strange men who sat around the kitchen table. Violet, this is George Archer. Just George is fine, the tall man said, standing up to shake her hand. She tried not to laugh. George Archer was so tall he couldn't stand straight in the low-ceilinged room. His head bent to one side, almost touching his shoulder. Everything about him was long, from his snake-like arms and wormy fingers to his pencil-thin nose that almost divided his face in 2. His head was completely bald and creamy white like a freshly laid egg. Clearly uncomfortable, he quickly sat back down. Look at this little section here, guys. I'm going to stop you here for a second. From his snake-like arms and wormy fingers. I think that's really interesting. And there's going to be a new subject terminology, like a new word you're going to learn next week. And that might tie into the idea. We'll see as the book continues. And I'm Edward. Pleased to meet you, Violet, the smaller of the archers said, as he stood to shake her hand too. Again she had to stop herself laughing. Violet wasn't even the tallest in her class, but she was the same height as Edward Archer. What he lacked in height he made up of width. He was square, like a loaf of bread. His head was attached straight to his shoulders, as if he had forgotten to grow a neck, and his eyes stuck out a little as they were trying to escape from his face. The 2 brothers wore the same brown suits and shiny brown shoes. Edward Archer had a funny bowler hat, just like the one on her dad's favourite painting of a man with no face. Mr. George Archer had the same hat, but his rested on the table beside him. He probably wasn't wearing it because it would fall off every time he stood up indoors. Both of them had weird, reddish eyes hidden behind rectangular gold frames. They looked a little scary until George took his specs off. Oh, it's just the glasses. I thought there was something wrong with your eyes. Violet smiled at the taller twin. Why are the lenses red? George Archer pushed his glasses back onto his nose. They're rose-tinted, he scowled. Wow, Violet dear, Edward Archer quickly interrupted his brother. It's a funny story, really. One we hope your father will help us solve. You see, this little town of ours is perfect except one curious fact. Every single inhabitant here wears glasses. After only a short time in perfect, Violet, you and your family will find that your eyesight starts to get dusty, and then the edges of your vision will blur, and eventually you will all go completely blind. We've had numerous scientists come to investigate our situation. They say it's because we're so close to the sun. Mum, Violet quivered, trying not to cry. I don't want to go blind. I like being able to see. I knew we shouldn't have moved here. Oh, no, I didn't mean to frighten you, Violet dear, Edward Archer said kindly. I'm sure the effects are only temporary. They wear off as soon as you leave this town of ours, although I'm quite sure you won't ever want to leave perfect. Nobody ever does. The stout man smiled. In fact, we have found a clever way around our little problem. These glasses work a treat. You'll find everybody here is wearing them. They're quite in vogue, as they say. He adjusted his own pair a little, resettling them on his nose. You'll have to visit our spectacle shop, dear, so we can fit you with a pair, George Arthur smiled. Violet grabbed her mother's pinstriped skirt. I don't want to wear glasses, Mum. There's nothing wrong with my eyes. Well, that's why your father's here, dear, Edward smiled. Hopefully soon nobody will need to wear them. The Archers were her dad's new bosses. Eugene was headhunted, a man had said proudly to friends one evening. Violet didn't think that sounded like a good thing and tried hard not to imagine her dad was out of his head. He'd won an award for his research and had been on the cover of I Spy magazine. Her man said the whole world was talking about it, or at least the part of the world that loved eyes too. He said the Archers had read the article in I Spy and searched him out for the job. It's only for a short time, Violet, her mother shushed, looking anxiously at her husband. Your father will fix the problem. Don't worry, Violet, her dad said, reaching to rub her head. She moved around her mother's back, away from his arms. She's tired, he sighed, his cheeks a little red. It's been a long day. I think it's probably time for bed. Oh, no, not yet, Edward Archer said quickly. You must try our tea. It's a perfect tradition. Oh, yes, George Archer smiled, grabbing a teapot and cups from the worktop. It's our custom, I assure you. A small package sat on the table, and Edward opened it, scooped out 2 large spoons of tea leaves, and tipped them into the pot. The package was named with Archer's Tea printed in ornate gold letters under a brownish picture of the twins in their bowler hats and white aprons. It's you, Violet said, looking at Edward. Eagle-eyed, I see, the smaller twin smiled, pouring boiling water into the pot. Yes, it's our tea. We own the factory that produces it. It's a big employer in the town, something we're very proud of. I don't like tea, Violet said, looking at her mother. You'll like this one, George Archer replied sharply. This tea is a speciality here. It's harvested daily and delivered fresh to every doorstep in Perfect each morning. It's made from the chameleon plant, which is unique to our town. It's very good for your health and has the most unusual properties. You'll see what I mean. Most people here drink at least a cup a day. It's a tea-mad town, Edward smiled. Violet didn't like tea, and she wasn't sure about the Archers. There was something odd about them. Eugene and Rose looked at each other as they sat down at the table, and Violet sat between them. George Archer stared at her from his place opposite as his brother poured the tea. Now imagine the nicest taste you can think of, then take a sip, Edward said, raising his mug. Violet did as she was told. She imagined her father's favourite drink, which was hers too, ice cream sundae. Big chunks of cold vanilla ice cream dunked in fizzy orange, and she pictured clouds of froth bubbling over the rim of the glass and would almost taste the burst of flavour. Her mouth watered as she raised the mug of tea. A waft of vanilla tinkled her nose. She took a sip, careful not to burn her lips. The tea fizzed as she tasted orange and vanilla heaven. This couldn't be tea. She opened her eyes to check no one had swapped the cups, but sure enough, a dull, milky brown liquid smiled back at her. She glanced either side at her mum and dad. Their eyes were still shut and silly smiles playing on their lips. I think I'll have another cup, said Father, a little later. We thought you might, the Archers replied in unison. The Browns finished one pot and then had another as Edward told them all about their new home. Edward was the chatty one, and Violet warmed to him a little more than George, who just seemed to snarl and stare, though, truth be told, she wasn't sure she liked either of them very much at all. Violet heard her mother say the same thing to her dad as they waved goodbye to the Archers from the steps of their new home a little later. They gave me the creeps, Eugene, Rose whispered through a staged smile. That night, Violet climbed beneath her new sheets in her new room. The town sounded nice enough from what Edward had said, and the tea did weigh heavily in its favour. There were some strange things about the place, though. Edward had told them about a curfew. He said it was so everyone got a good night's sleep in perfect. Sufficient sleep makes for a happy and healthy town. She definitely didn't like the idea of a curfew or going blind. And anyway, how could she ever live in a place called perfect? She'd have to be neat and tidy. She'd definitely have to brush her hair and probably even clean her shoes. It just wouldn't work. Violet made her mind. She didn't and wouldn't like perfect. And then she turned over and slipped into a perfect night's sleep, oblivious to the troubles the morning would bring. Okay, so there are lots and lots of what I call red flags in this book. And I'm calling them red flags. So there is a term which we're going to learn about in this coming week. Hopefully the first 2 chapters have enticed you enough to want to read the rest of it with me. We found that Violet's quite a stubborn character, but she's quite feisty. She's quite good. She's going to put on a little fight with her new move, and I think we can all sort of resonate, or even if it's just a change of school, we're a bit fearful of the new, and we definitely get a bit of an eerie feeling about the 2 brothers with their brown suits and the brown shiny shoes. And what about that tea? I mean, how does a tea make you imagine and actually drink something that you're imagining? Very strange. And what is about the glasses? Why is everyone's eyes going blind? And why do they have to have these special glasses? All these questions will be answered as we read forward. Like I said, the PDF is available. I've got the link. Yes, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, could you just send me a message and let me know that at least one of you is watching these? I'm still losing my voice. It's been about 3 months since my illness, so sorry about that. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely rest of your afternoon. And yes, like I said, let me know if you are watching this, and I'll continue and I'll upload another one this week. Okay, take care.